Hello and welcome to the Chess Bit, the podcast where three guys talk about chess. But once again, three guys has become two guys. Robin is having internet problems this morning, and so I make my glorious return, but only before the face of Phil Makepeace, my good friend. So, Phil, how are you doing?
I'm okay. Have you just been for a walk? I see a red Mac behind you.
No, that's my training top. I don't know why it's hanging up. I suspect that my mum has popped into the room at some point, and she likes to hang things up. So, but yeah,
I
I
have
haven't
my
been for a
normal
walk
array
any
of
time.
coats.
Yeah, you've done the same thing. So,
Yeah.
But first, let's just talk about the Rapid World Championship because it obviously has just finished. Did you make a lot of it? Did you enjoy it? Was it? I haven't managed to follow it very well. I've dipped in and out because I've been away with family. But what did you make of it? Presumably having caught quite a bit of it.
I thought it was great. The broadcast options were varied and good. I mean, we had Lecco and Ganguly on day one. I was watching the Chess 24 stuff, and then it was young Gustafsson, the glorious return thereof, yesterday,
And his
alongside
children.
Lecco. Yes, and Siri. He kept he had his phone as kind of like we do, just sort of here below the mic, and Siri kept going off at various stages. So it was like having a sort of color commentator, just in German, just accompanying what he was doing a lot of the time. I'm not sure why he had that. Probably just getting messages about how from Magnus maybe about how things were going.
Yeah, and it was exciting for us because we got a new young star in Nodirbek Abdisattorov, who ended up winning a tiebreaker against Jan Nepomniachtchi. And obviously there was four first place finishers. Only two of them went into the tiebreaker. So and one of those finishers was Magnus Carlsen. So there's so much narrative here to get through.
Yeah.
So I think before we jump into the narrative, let's give Abdusattorov his fair due and talk a little bit about him. So, what have you made of him? Presumably, you didn't know much about him before this tournament.
I mean, I knew who he was, but yeah, he's been around for a few years, but he's 17 and he's the world champion at Rapid. That's insane. That's not a thing. Yeah, and he just seems so humble and chill. Like he beat Magnus and then was interviewed about it and said, "Well, actually, I'd like to play better in my next game." That's an incredible attitude, and he just seems like a very. He sort of reminds me of. He reminds me of Ferrugia a little bit, but Ferrugia seems to have gone a little way. The whole thing with Vacanze, and he's gone a bit more Carlsen since he's got good.
A bit aggy, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has got a bit aggy. I hope Abdusattorov does not have the same thing happen to him. But yeah, he's just a remarkable young man, and we talked a few months ago about what they're doing in Uzbekistan for chess, where they're really pumping a lot of money into it. But he's preceded this potential boom, but he therefore might help the boom now because it's not just a case of kind of artificially having lots of players, lots of people, kids starting to play, but he's going to be the figurehead for that, and maybe that will help, or we don't know whether that will help or hinder him. But he's just a very impressive young man who was the only player to beat Magnus in the entire tournament.
In terms of like the broader chess world, how do you expect him to sort of continue from here? Is he going to be a player who is going to stand out particularly in quicker formats, or do you think he will make a name for himself in the classical formats?
He doesn't strike me as an Nakamura. He doesn't strike me as someone who's just going to kind of do the equivalent of just going around all the franchise cricket tournaments and just flying it straight there. He seems like he's going to be more, doing things the proper way. I don't really see him becoming a streamer. The fact that he's not in the Grand Prix might help. So he's obviously now got this vast new chess wealth and prestige attached to his name. The fact that he's now got 12 months, 15 months, he's not going to be part of this World Championship cycle. He probably wouldn't be in it anyway. It means that he's got another 18 months of development, and he could be disgusting by this point next year. He could do a Ferrugia quite easily, and age 18, suddenly gain 150 points or something. Yeah,
Presumably he's
so
fairly low ranked at the moment.
he has a FIDE, in the sort of 2600s. Yeah, he'll scoot up easily if he continues to play like this, because he's clearly 2700 strength.
And so let's move on then to talk about those tie breaks. So the situation was there was 4 people tied on the same score at the end of the tournament, and because of some arbitrary rule in the competition, only 2 of those people could enter the tie break, and that was done on a system of countback, which I will let you explain because I don't know what I'm talking about.
It's basically strength of opposition, how your opponents did in the tournament. So Abdusattorov, well, we can look at it a number of ways. Right, so we have 4 players: Abdusattorov, Nepo, Carlson, and Caruana, on 9.5 out of 13. In our preview, I mentioned that was a possible winning score, but it would probably be a pile-up. So I was happy with that prediction. That came in. Okay. Until 2017, or till maybe even 2018-19, it was 15 rounds. It was a longer event. Part of the reason they've reduced it is because 5 games in a day was considered too many, or too many on multiple days. They had 5 games on day one. Sorry. If you're gonna have a tournament with lower rounds, what you really should do is accelerate the pairings. Now, what this means is, instead of dividing in round 1 and 2 the pairings into halves, you do it into quarters. That way, you get people playing stronger players earlier on, and it just sort of funnels out, and it creates the same thing. It just means that you don't have these big rating discrepancies in the first few rounds. Like Magnus didn't really play anyone good until round 5. If you then don't do that, you get this kind of situation, I think, where, because the top players have played not so good players early on, who are never going to be near the top, it is kind of like a randomizer, where let's just look, like Abdusattorov, his tiebreak was just so far ahead of anyone else's, because he played a couple of low-ranked players in the first couple of rounds who actually did quite well. There was a 2350 player who got 6, and an IM who got 7. Other players would have played people who didn't do so well, and that would have affected their tiebreak later on. Now, Abdusattorov got amongst the big boys early as well. That helps. So because he won his first 3 games, actually his 3rd round game, he beat Caruana. He then played Nepo and drew, and he beat Carlson later on. All of the numbers just go in his favour, irrespective of what happens in that as well. He got 2 out of 3 against the other 3 players. No one else did that. No one else beat Carlson, and no one else beat Caruana in the tiebreak. Now, the problem comes if you have a 4-player tie, only having 2 go through to a playoff seems a bit much. I would much rather have it, you just base it on the tie breaks. That's what it is. You either just have the 1, 2, 3 from that, or you have all 4 players. Now, this was agreed with the players. This was agreed. This has been formulated a long time ago in consultation with the players. It's just this thing where these agreements happen not with all the players. Obviously, they're representatives, they're people on council, including Carlson.
Yeah.
And it's just not
publicized. They've not sat them down properly and said, what do you think of this rule in this scenario? They've been like, here's the list of rules. Okay, then please.
Yeah, but it's not satisfactory for these tiebreak rules to not just be kind of plastered everywhere, going like overnight going into day 3, so the players know what they had to do. So, for example, here we've got a comment from Bonji. So Fabiano Caruana took a very, very quick draw in the last round with Nepo. His tie breaks were always going to be worse than Nepo's. They were on the same number of points. There's absolutely no way that he would have ever have won. So Benji's asked, what happened in the last round with Fabi? Is there danger to see 6 withdrawals? Well, no, I don't think there is, because players are never going to. You're always going to get one player who's got the worst tiebreak, right?
Yeah, and yet it did happen.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of these things not being. It doesn't matter if the things are in the regs. Players just don't read the regs. We've had this a lot. We had this in the Grand Swiss, didn't we? Where players weren't aware of the tie breaks. It's not that the regs aren't there. It's just that they should be repeated and put up in big large font for chess players to read. So it's just unsatisfactory. It's not the tiebreak rules that are unsatisfactory, because they've been agreed, they've been formulated. It's just that we have yet another event where all we're talking about is this, and it's just FIDE just not broadcasting their own stuff. I don't know what it is about them. They just can't. They have to just be more vocal. Just talk. They just don't. They don't seem to have any kind of proper. I mean, who's their spokesperson? Is it the president? Is it Sutovsky? Well, he was very quiet during the event. He's only since now on Twitter and Facebook started to actually talk about things. These people need to actually just, you need to know who to go to for. It's just really frustrating how these events are run. There's always a discussion after the fact about something not quite being right.
I think as well, there's a lot riding on this tournament, it being straight after a World Championship that was more watched than any World Championship ever. And there's so many people getting into it. It's a good event. It ends in a good way. You have a young star breaking through, finishing on the same points as the one of the best players of all time. And you managed to get to the end, and any prospective fans watching this will be like, what? Why?
It's a World Championship. It's a World Championship,
Yeah,
John. This should be the pinnacle of rapid play chess, and it's just become a circus again.
Yeah. One final comment. Obviously, Ben Feingold tweeted yesterday about Magnus Carlsen in a previous tournament. I think it was the Sinkfeld Cup, when there was a similar rule in place, and he was one of the top 2 finishers, and argued that unless all 4 players who finished top were in the playoff, he wasn't going to play in it. And I think in the end they didn't go with the playoffs at all, if I recall correctly. So interesting from Magnus to at least be consistent on this when he comes out yesterday and sort of blasts the competition a little bit. So let's move on to Magnus Carlsen. In some senses, like, it's a successful tournament for him to finish top. I mean, I think he'll be disappointed because from what I could see, he probably had a few chances to maybe take an outright lead, and he probably will be disappointed not to have done so. But at the same time, he's just come in a few weeks out of a World Championship cycle and gone into another tournament and finished top. And yeah, I think that's impressive both for him and Nepo. But what did you make of Carlsen's tournament in particular?
I think he just did what we expected, didn't he? Just wasn't particularly dominant, just played in a very, very solid style that meant that he drew a few. And then the one time that he pressed from a level position or a levelish position was against Abdusattorov, and he got done in the end. I don't really think Carlsen's the story here. I think Nepo's the story, apart from Abdusattorov, of course, and we shouldn't take that away from him. Nepo, 3 weeks ago, we were wondering whether we'd ever play again. Not entirely seriously, but also half seriously. He'd been humiliated on the world stage, and not just the world stage of chess. The World Championship's a big deal outside of chess. It's the only time that a lot of people follow it. And he was unbeaten. He generally just got it done and drew with Magnus with black very comfortably. Nepo's back. He's either just done nothing for the last 3 weeks, or he's done lots, and I'm not sure which it is. But either way, I'm extremely impressed by Nepo's recovery from just a mental perspective. I'm amazed he even played this event. He's clearly a very, very strong young man. Yeah,
and I think the interesting thing for me is that it just reveals the the fine line between success and failure in the World Championships. And I think, we at the risk of going back into those conversations again, but it's easy to think of that World Championship as just a collapse and him being nowhere near the level, but he's very, very obviously playing high level chess, and it just hasn't worked out for him. And look, same is true of Carlsen. The two of them have come into this tournament, and they've both clearly been in pretty good nick, even despite the obvious pressures and stresses and strains that tournament brings. So the World Chess Championships clearly is good for your chess, and even with those two sort of playing, I mean, as you said with Carlsen, he sort of played solid chess and got through it. Nepo's come out of, like you said, like basically a humiliation, as you said, on the world stage, and he's been able to come through and finish top in this tournament as well. So interesting to see that aspect of it, I think. But in terms of Nepo, what do you think about so he loses the tiebreak, he draws with white and then loses with black, I believe.
I mean, it's a blitz. It's a blitz playoff.
Just a variance thing.
I don't think it particularly tells us anything about what's going to happen today in the next couple of days with the blitz. I don't think that suggests that Abdusattorov is necessarily a better blitz player. It's just a blitz playoff, and we can't read an enormous amount into that. Yeah. Maybe Abdusattorov was just slightly fresher or felt less pressure. I'm not going to try and diagnose the playoff. That's just a playoff.
Yeah, I mean, it's chess. Sometimes shit just happens, right? And especially in these rapid formats as well. So again, don't want to read too much into that. But moving on from here, then you've mentioned, like, what do we take into the blitz aspect of this tournament, the Blitz World Championship? So what is it in particular that you have learned from the rapid play that you are going to take into the blitz? Who are the players who you think actually they could perform quite well? Be interesting to see how they do. And vice versa, I suppose, the players who you think, actually, I thought they would do quite well, and now I'm a little bit more questionable of where they'll be.
I don't think anybody in particular is performed below, or obviously people perform below expectations, but in terms of the names that we were talking about in the preview, I don't think there's particularly anyone who, would have. I mean, I'm just looking down the list now. Jabava took the fight to the event, and actually in the end only finished in a tie for 39th, but he was up there throughout. So if you take, I mean, he drew one and lost two of his final three games, but he'd been in the lead for a long time, including draws with Carlsen and Nepo and Duda and all of these guys. So I don't think we can particularly read much into Jabava, who I think will perform strongly again in the blitz. Nepo, I think, is probably slightly weaker at blitz. I don't think we'll necessarily see him in the top three in the blitz, but that's something we'd expect. Carlsen, it depends maybe mentally how much this tiebreak furore. It's not a farce. It's just a thing where it hasn't been communicated properly. If he gets angry, I think he'll absolutely ruin the field, because I think Carlsen responds quite well to his when you've got in chess, when you've got sort of brimming emotions, I think that actually helps you to play more instinctively and be better at blitz. That's my take on this, that maybe Carlsen actually is just going to come out and steamroller everyone and basically get to a point where he doesn't have to rely on a tiebreak. He wants to win it outright.
I do expect him to just come out and try and crush a little bit, I think.
Well, Carlsen should have won it outright. He should have beaten Nakamura in the last round. He had this extra pawn that he completely misplayed the rook ending. Carlsen should have won it outright. We shouldn't have been having any of this conversation. But he didn't, so now he's got to get even. And he's lost his world title. That will mean a lot to him. He will be very motivated not to lose both, because he's still reigning champion in two of the three formats. By the end of tomorrow, it may only be one.
And one final thing to cover before we talk a little bit about the scheduling for the blitz. But we made some predictions for the rapid play in our preview podcast. I'll just run through those. So in terms of tournament winner, I believe you said Sergei Karyakin to win.
I did not. I said Firouzja to win.
Firouzja to win.
Firouzja lost to my dark horse in the last round. So Firouzja got 8, and he lost to my dark horse, who was Karyakin.
And Karyakin had a fairly good run in the end, right? He started off quite badly, but pulled it out.
He started with 1 out of 4, and then got 8 out of 9 to finish in a tie for 5th. So he did that, but he was never going to challenge. He never got into position to actually challenge for the title.
And then to stay on the subject of you said that your player to flop was going to be Hikaru Nakamura, who didn't flop. So what do you make of that?
He had a weird event. He drew millions of games. I think he remained unbeaten. Yeah, so he won 5, drew 8. So he definitely wasn't at his best.
He's holding out for the rapid play element of the tournament.
But he definitely, I mean, again, he finished tied 5th. He did absolutely fine. I'm assuming he lost quite a few rating points. He lost 13. That's not terrible. You know, he was rated 28-40 odd, so 28-36. He still performed at 28-780. He did okay. Yeah, I was wrong.
And Robin said Jan Christoph Duda for the winner. His dark horse was, remind me,
Jordan Van Forest.
How did Van Forest do?
He did very well. He got 8.5. He was up there.
Mm-hmm.
Never quite top couple of boards, but up there. And so was Duda. Duda was leading for a bit, and he just faded a little bit to get 9 points in the end.
On the final day, wasn't he? Going into the final day, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So all of our guys did okay.
And then Robin's flop was Peter Svidler, who in fact pulled out of the tournament right at the end.
The biggest flop possible.
Yeah, exactly. So, well done, Robin, for getting that. But so the Blitz tournament starts today. Kicks off what time? European time?
I think it kicks off at 2 p.m. Does it not? I'd be wrong.
No idea. And the format for that is obviously, with it being a Blitz tournament, so the games will be a minute long. It will you can get a lot more games in, so it's a longer format, right? Is it 21 games?
It's 21 games. So it starts at 2 p.m. They'll play 12 today, and then the remaining 9 tomorrow. So 3 minutes plus 2 seconds a move. So games will last somewhere between 7 and 11 minutes.
Cool. Well, we will be back either tonight or tomorrow with the coverage of what happens today. Phil, it's been a pleasure chatting again to you, and it's been
good to have you back.
Yeah, it's nice to be back, and I'm looking forward to maybe getting into the Blitz a little bit more, although Blitz chess does pass me by a little bit. Although my brother-in-law, who I've been staying with, likes to watch plays a lot of Blitz and watches a lot of Blitz, so it was quite fun watching. I think he had Eric Rosen was preparing for some Blitz tournament, and so he was playing 2-minute chess, but was berserking everything. So it was basically 1 minute chess. So yeah, I've maybe got my eye in a little better than I have done before. So looking forward to that. So cool. I will chat again to you tomorrow. I'll speak to the listeners again tomorrow. Thank you for those who made comments in the chat, and we will see you soon.